For a while now, people have been talking about how generative AI is making us smarter, faster, and more capable. And it's good to see how that conversation is evolving from questions like what can or should AI be doing for us towards more nuanced questions like when intelligence becomes abundant, what becomes scarce in its place? Because history's been here before. The printing press didn't just spread ideas, it made literacy itself more widespread, and power shifted because of that. Similarly, the Industrial Revolution didn't remove the need for manual labour, but it did change what that manual labour was worth, at least economically. Every time a resource that was scarce becomes more abundant, a new scarcity emerges to take its place. And when something is recognized as being scarce, it becomes more valuable. So economic systems reorganize themselves to reflect these new locations of scarcity and value. And importantly, so do the human systems that shape themselves around those dynamics. Often we don't notice those changes until we look back with hindsight. So when trying to predict what these new scarcities might be as generative AI takes care of cognitive intelligence for us, a lot of leadership conversation has started to focus on a set of so-called more human qualities, things like judgment and discernment, accountability, trust, and even wisdom. As cognitive ability becomes relatively less valuable, these ostensibly more human qualities will take center stage. A new premium will be placed on those capabilities, on those qualities. And to be honest, I kind of agree with that to an extent, but I don't think it goes quite far enough. Because like the concept of intelligence, the notion of good judgment, let's say, just to take one example of those qualities, it doesn't mean just one thing. It doesn't look or feel the same for everybody everywhere. It is not a human universal in how it's measured or interpreted. So what looks like decisive judgment, strong leadership in one team or in one context could be interpreted as reckless or selfish or unpredictable or even dangerous in another team or in another cultural context. So when we first started talking about intelligence as a concept and we started to measure it through things like IQ tests and so on, we treated intelligence as if it was this universal human quality, infinitely portable and transferable across cultures and communities and identities and lived experiences. So intelligence could be measured the same way for everybody everywhere. But that assumption has since been challenged, of course, and we now recognize multiple intelligences or different ways of knowing, ways of being, ways of feeling, ways of problem solving. And these forms of intelligence, if you want to use that word, don't always align with the benchmarks, the metrics that were constructed in a Western neurotypical context. And I think we're now at risk of making a similar mistake about some of these new human qualities, judgment, wisdom, and so on, upon which we are about to place an increased relative value. So as we're in the process right now of constructing and reconstructing these values in the jet stream of AI, so to speak, it's important that we ask a few critical questions. Questions like whose judgment is actually going to count if judgment is one of these new premium qualities? Who will that judgment be legitimized by? Whose power becomes diminished if their judgment is not considered legitimate? And the same questions need to be asked of the others as well. Trust, discernment, accountability, wisdom. Because when we start talking about new human qualities, as we have been, we need to ask ourselves very carefully who we mean by human. And we need to actively seek to understand more carefully how these capacities, these qualities are experienced, interpreted, measured, evaluated, performed, and embodied by different kinds of people who are living, experiencing, and being in very different kinds of local worlds.